Review this game. C4, English opening. That's quite an interesting move. So, um, well, white play this move. White can be very flexible in opening. White can push the d pawn to d4, d3, or knight f3. So white has a couple of ways to move pieces. That's a very interesting opening. e5. So black chose to play reverse Sicilian, and g3, and knight to c6, bishop g2, bishop c5. So actually, I would move my bishop to g7 to build a very solid structure. So yeah, so bishop to c5 aiming at this diagonal, but after castle, we cannot really do anything on this diagonal because it's very like solid at the king side. So yeah, so I will also build up this the structure and turn the game into close Sicilian. So bishop c5, knight c3, knight e7, d3. Yeah, this structure is really it's basically the same as black in close Sicilian. Bishop b5. So yeah, this move like make us like waste one move. If we have bishop to g7, we don't need to worry about the placement of bishop. I feel like maybe we're worrying about knight e5, knight e4, kicking the bishop, or a3, b4. So bishop staying at c5 potentially could be a target. So it will be much safer in g7. And also look at this diagonal, bishop with g7 still can do a lot of things. If black want to attack on the queen side, yeah. So bishop to b4 and bishop to d2. So from white's perspective, I think we can keep developing pieces. I don't worry much about trading our knight with the bishop. I mean, we have a double pawn, but we have a pawn close to the center. And also, if we open up this semi-open file, our rook and the bishop can aim at the b7. So I don't worry about the trading. So I will keep developing pieces. So bishop to d2, bishop, yeah. Why do we trade the knight? I mean, we can castle or d6. So, I mean, I think bishop is usually like better than the knight, and we have already moved 1, 2, 3 moves to exchange the bishop with the knight. It feels like it's not worth it. The knight only moved one move, so I would just play d6 and castle and leave the bishop at b4. If white kick my bishop, then I would think about maybe I should trade the knight, so I can at least save one move. So d5. Attack. Okay, so black want to push the pawn to attack the center. Maybe that's a reason trade the bishop with the knight. Knight to d5, rook c1, and I will keep the dark square bishop. To be honest, I think this position is very open, so the bishop is usually better than the knight, and I will maybe move the bishop back to d2. Or yeah, I'll move the bishop back to d2 and knight f3, rook c1. This is like a dragon variation, right? This looks like dragon variation in Sicilian. Okay, we didn't take the bishop. Bishop to e6, knight f3, take that. Pawn takes. I think either pawn takes or rook takes is fine. Rook takes, we can attack the semi-open file. Pawn takes, the pawn getting closer to the center. Black take the pawn, but with our bishop being trapped at this corner, we need to. Okay, so black spend like 3 minutes. Yeah, I think black was confident that black won't like lose his bishop. But let's see, what about c4? And this is what white play. And queen d6, preparing for maybe queen to a3. But it feels like black pieces will be very passive to save the bishop. even though black won a pawn, but the pieces are really passive. And the bishop cannot really move out, even though you have queen to protect the bishop. And queen to a4, queen to b4 can make the queen traded. So, or can we move knight to d2 to control b3, because black want to move the queen and later move the bishop out, but we can first of all block this diagonal and control b3. And later after rook e1, I think black has to move the queen to protect the bishop. That's very passive. And I don't think, for example, castle, rook a1, or maybe, yeah, knight can go to b4. But what about taking the bishop first? Queen takes, castle. If you push b5 and rook a1 here, and the bishop is trapped. Yeah, the bishop is trapped. Or yeah, b5 is also problematic. The knight is pinned. So I think the bishop will be trapped after 92. Queen a4, trading the queens. I think white is still better because white can win the center pawn. And also the bishop is still like awkward here. Like king d2, f6, knight g4, a5, knight e3. I think white wants to exchange the knights. It's really hard for black to push the pawn. Even though your bishop retreat to a4, it's still very hard to move back. Maybe take us a couple of moves. c5 and bishop can retreat. Or a4 bishop b3, that looks good. a4, yeah. But knight f1, knight e2, the bishop will be captured and black will lose a pawn. Yeah, so that's a problem with this pawn structure. Black cannot really escape the bishop. Knight e5, knight e2, yeah, that's a very good plan to attack the bishop. d4, e3, yeah, this is very solid. Don't hurry taking the bishop, but protecting the d4 pawn, that's really good. Now white is super good because up one pawn, and also the bishop is targeted at this diagonal. This is an open position, a lot of open diagonals, so the bishop is way better than the knight, and also white has a very good control of the center. So white is so good. Take the rook, rook d1. Exchanging the rook make us like lose the a file. I don't think b file is a good way to attack, to be honest. I feel like why don't we attack the b7 pawn, because clearly this is a weakness, right? We cannot take that now because our bishop will be pinned, but we can move king to c3 and then we can win the pawn, right? Rook d1, king c7, protect b7, knight, knight f, knight f4. Yeah, I think we move the knight to d6. So this position is really good for a knight, because if you have a knight at d6, white cannot really kick you away, and your knight can attack c4. Of course, white can keep pushing the pawn, but you can move the rook to protect e5. If you have a king at d6, where can you put the knight? You don't have a very good square for the knight. And white can also push the pawn to e5. So knight e7, knight d6, I think that's a good plan. e4, knight e7, bishop, rook e8, knight d8, f5, rook e7. Yes, this open file is so good to control. The white wants to attack two pawns, and also the king, the rook has to protect, like, yeah, Can we play b6? And if white play here, we can be here. Or maybe rook a6. Oh, okay, we'll lose the pawn. Yeah, so black pieces are very passive. H5, rook b6, rook e6. Yeah, that's quite good. And then we can move the king further in. Yeah, that's a very good plan. Rook b6. Yeah, now white is definitely winning. So it's a very good plan from white to first move the rook to e6 and then move the king to 6th rank. That's a very good plan. Yeah, I don't think we need to walk through the rest of the game. So I think the game, first of all, the structure I recommend is g6, bishop g7, and this is black can build a very solid structure. For example, I can play a couple of moves. For example, white play d3 and we can play d6. This is just close Sicilian. And black can move pawn to f5. Yeah, and bishop e6, queen d7, f4 to attack white's king side. And white can play rook b1, b4, b5 to attack the queen side. So this is what I recommend. So bishop c5. Yeah, so we wasted a couple of moves in the opening. And d5, so trade the... Yeah, I think from white's perspective, I would like remain the dark square bishop. I think this is a very good piece to remain. And we can, for example, bishop d2, rook c1, a3, b4, b5 to attack the queen side. So this is just like dragon variation. And after trading the knight with the bishop, I think black is rushy to take the pawn, even though we won the pawn for a couple of moves, but the bishop is very, very passive after c4. So we use like the queen, the knight, and the pawn to save the bishop. And it's not worth it if we just win a pawn. It's not worth it. And white set up a very good plan, but actually we can do better to trap the bishop, to win the bishop. So after trading the queens, we won the pawn, that's good. And the white has a very good pawn structure and also better, good center control. And the maneuvering of the knight is quite interesting. And we move the knight to d2. And then we win the pawn. Yes. And actually after this position, white is so good. So maybe, yeah, I'm not sure c5 is a good move, because this move makes this diagonal even weaker. Look at the bishop. The bishop is targeting this diagonal. After c5, this makes us just weaker. And also after d5, white will have a passed pawn. So c5 is not good. And what we can do, maybe we can find a position for the knight. Maybe bishop c7 to protect the knight, protect the rook, and rook ea to control this semi-open file. Or f5, knight g5 to control e4. Yeah, this is something I think better than ec5. After the exchange, the b7 pawn becomes a target. Yeah. And this plan is really good. Move the bishop to the center. Trade and rook to a5. Yeah. But what about king e5? If you take my pawn, I can move king to d4. Can I take the pawn? d6. Yeah, the king can... No. Yeah, we cannot do anything. King e5. If you take... Move the king back. And then we can win e4. Yes. We can win the e4 pawn with this type of move. But white is still better. But the rook is free. I think the good thing for black is the rook is free. Maybe we can win one of the pawn. If b6, king to c6, if you go down, I can take your pawn. Yeah, this is something we can try. I think black can activate the king to d4, and if you take, I can move back and win the e4. The purpose is we can break this pawn structure. This pawn structure is, the pawns are really like connected, and we cannot win any of the pawn. So we can actually, can we take the pawn? No, yeah, we'll lose the pawn. We cannot really trade the rooks. Yeah, so maybe that's the reason we push the pawn. But if we move here, here, yeah, we can protect the c7 and win the e4. If you check, I move here. Can we play king c7? Take. Yeah, I think it's the same. So we can defend b7, giving up c5, defending b7, but we can win in the e4 to make the white pawns like kind of separated, and then maybe our rook will have a chance to win some pawn on the king side, to at least make the position complicated. Yes, that's it.